Hey y'all, and welcome back. Today we're going to be expanding on place value, and we'll be talking about how we can understand what each of those places means. We're going to be using those places to help us write down the word form of a number, and also for us to look at word forms and change them back into numerical forms. So, it all starts out with the decimal. Everything is based on where this decimal is. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so that way it's easier for us to see. We've got this decimal right here, and the decimal tells us how much each one of these is worth. And it tells us by whether it's to the left or right of that decimal, and how many steps or how many places away from the decimal it is. We're all very familiar with whole numbers, so whole numbers would be things like, here I've got 5, that's really the same thing as 5 ones, and it has hidden there a decimal. Or I might think about something like 22, which is 2 tens and 2 ones, and hidden over here is our decimal. We just get lazy, we don't have to write it on there. Most of the time we've just been writing 22 and not showing our decimal, which is totally okay. Or we might say I've got 132, which again is 1 100, 3 tens, and 2 ones. Those are our decimals hidden right here. All we've done here is we've looked at our whole numbers and we've added a decimal to the end. Now we can tell how much something is worth. It's pretty obvious which one of these has the most worth, because we can see over here the 5 and the 22 have nothing in their hundred section, and 100 is worth a lot more than any of this other junk. So we know that 132 is worth way more than the 5 and the 22. So we've talked about whole numbers. Where it starts to get a little bit more complicated is when we go onto the other side of the decimal. Again, remember, we have everything based on where this decimal is. To the other side of the decimal, we've got our tenths place, then our hundredths place, then our thousandths place. And you'll notice I'm going tss after each one of those, because that's what tells us it's on the right side of the decimal. You might also notice a pattern. Tenths and tens, hundredths and hundreds. If I were to keep going this way to the whole numbers, I would have thousands, and over here I've got thousandths. That THS just tells us that it's a decimal number. Each one of these is 10 times bigger than the one to the right. Oh, that sounds a little complicated. Let's make sure we understand that. Tens are 10 times bigger than the 1, and hundreds are 10 times bigger than the tens. The same thing is true for the ones. Ones are 10 times bigger than a tenth. Tenths are 10 times bigger than a hundredth. And thousandths are 10 times smaller than a hundredth. All we're doing there is we're saying we know that if we go to the right, we're getting 10 times smaller. If we go to the left, we're getting 10 times bigger. Just by moving where the decimal is, we can change their value. We can change how much they are worth. Let's see an example. If I offered you 5.13 or $5.13, that's a lot different number if I move where this decimal is. If I move it over to a different location, and I offer you instead, with a decimal right there, $513. $513 is way more than $5.13. And all we've done is we've moved that decimal to a different place. Place value is based on where that decimal is. So here we've got our hundreds, tens, ones, our decimal, our tenths, hundreds, and thousands. If I were you and I was taking notes, I would write down this place value chart because it will help us in our next section. I would write down, here's our decimal. To the left of our decimal, our first place is the ones place. After the ones place, our next place is our tens place. After the tens is our hundreds place. And if I wanted to keep going, I could add thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, millions. I could keep on going forever and ever to the left. Instead, on the right, I would have, after ones comes a 10, but because it's on the right of the decimal, it adds a THS. This is the tenths. Then our next one is the hundredths. Then after the hundredths, I have the thousands. Now you may be looking at that and saying, why would I ever need to know out to those places? Well, the hundredths place is our pennies. The thousands place we actually see sometimes in gasoline where it says it's to a fractional part of a penny, our thousands place. We can also use these places to name numbers. So I'm going to write out a number and it'll be pretty easy for us to tell what that number is. This time, instead of going with a whole number, I'm going to write out a number that has a decimal on it. So here I've got 21 decimal 3. If I wanted to read this one, I would read this as 21. The decimal is always said as and. So the decimal is just like an and. So 21, and then I read however much my number is over here, 3, and I look at what place value it's in, the tenths. 21 and 3 tenths. So this one would be written out as 21 and 3 tenths. Let's try another one. What if I said I've got 1/4 decimal 5/8. Here I've got 14, and then over here I see 58. But this isn't 58 tenths. I go out to the farthest one to the right. This is 58, and I look up 58 hundredths. So this is the number 14 and 58 hundredths. Let's try a couple more. So I'm going to write one, and all I want you to do is I want you to think in your head, how would you say this number? What is its real name? Okay, so I've got 167 decimal 25. How would you say this number? Pause the video and figure it out. For me, I would say this is 167 and 25. Then I look up to see where I'm at, hundredths, because I'm in the hundredths place. 167 and 25 hundredths. Let's try another one, okay? Let's say I have 20 decimal 123. What's the real name of that number? Pause the video and see if you can figure it out. Okay, 20, and then I see another number, 123. To find its name, I go all the way up to the top. Thousands. This is 20 and 123 thousandths. Okay, let's try one more like this. And this time, I'm going to get complicated. This time, I'm going to try something that maybe might confuse some of you. So, I'm going to say I've got 24 decimal 03. Okay, pause the video and see if you can figure it out. Okay, 24 decimal 03, its real name is 24 And then I look over here, I see just a 3. The 0 is just holding its place. So 24 and 3, it's in the hundreds place, 3 hundredths. So this one's real name would be 24 and 3 hundredths. Now I'm going to try something a little bit more complicated. I'm going to tell you a number, and I want you to write down that number. So I'm going to say a number, and I want you to write it down. I want you to write down 12 and 15 hundredths. 12 and 15 hundredths. Go ahead and write that number down, and then I'm going to show you what it is. Okay, so 12 and 15 hundredths. That's 12 and is the decimal. Then I want 15, and I know I want it to end in the hundreds. So I write out my places. Now I have to write 15, so it ends there. 15 hundredths. Did you get it right? Thumbs up or thumbs down? 12 and 15 hundredths. Let's try another one. Now, I want you to write down the number 5 and 6 tenths. That's 5 and 6 tenths. Once you've written it down, you can relax. 5 and 6 tenths. Okay, for me, here's how I would write it. I would say that's 5, and then I know it ended in the tenths place, so I'm going to write, there's my tenths place. The 6 has to end there, so it's going to be 6 right there. Did you get it right? Let's try one more. This time will be a little bit more complicated. Okay? Let's say now that I wanted you to write 15 and 8 thousandths. 15 and 8 thousandths. That's 15 and 8 thousandths. Okay, so if I were to write this one down, I would write first 15, that's the easy part. The and tells me I've got a decimal. Then I'm going to go to 8 thousandths. This is the tenths place, this is the hundredths place, this is the thousandths place. So I know I have to write an 8, so it ends in the thousandths place. But what do I do with this empty stuff here? Pause the video and see if you can figure it out. I bet most of you were able to figure it out. For this empty stuff, all we're going to do is we're going to fill in something that says there's nothing there. So what we're going to fill in is we're going to fill in some zeros. This is 15 and 8 thousandths. All we did is we filled in those empty spaces with zeros. Let's try one more, and then we'll be done on this video. So, if I wanted you to write in the number 125 and 15 hundredths, how would you write that? 125 and 15 hundredths. 125 and tenths, hundredths, 15 hundredths. If I had instead said 125 and 15 thousandths, how would you have changed it? What would be different if I instead said 125 and 15 thousandths instead of saying hundredths? Go ahead and write down how it would be different. Okay, hopefully you were able to figure it out. Remember, we say the first part is pretty easy. 125, and then I want to get out to the thousandths place. This is the tenths, this is the hundredths, this is the thousandths. So I know I want to have 15 end in the thousandths place. 15 has to end right over here in the thousandths place. But I've got an empty space. What should I fill in there? If you remember from earlier, we need to fill in a 0. So this is 125 and 15 thousandths. Hopefully this helped you with naming place values. Let me know down in the comments, and I hope to see you next time. Goodbye.